true. Over time, the razor sharpness of those memories does fade. But there are still things that I will never forget, that are burnt into my mind and my heart. Mostly things about him, my beloved son, the child that came to his father and me as a gift from God. And throughout his life, he never did stop mystifying me and teaching me. But my feelings during those awful hours as he suffered and finally died. Yes, I still remember. My sense of unease had been building through those last weeks. Call it a mother's intuition, but I knew everything was not well. He had pushed the establishment, powerful people, too far. I wanted to protect him, to tell him to stop. But stop what? Stop doing what he seemed so clearly here to do. Stop being who he was. We gathered that last night at the Mount of Olives, and Jesus had asked us to stay awake while he prayed. He was worried, sad, and as he prayed, I prayed for his safety and watched him. Finally, after a long time, he went to his friends, and of course, they were sleeping. I was angry and wondered how they could be so thoughtless, but Jesus was gentle with them, as he often was. He simply asked them why they slept. And then he asked them to pray for their own deliverance. But their sleeping was nothing to what happened immediately afterwards. A crowd of people seemed to surge up out of the darkness, and Judas, Jesus' friend, he was with them. He walked straight up to my son and he kissed him. I thought, what is going on? But he looked Jesus right in the eye, and Jesus looked directly back at Judas and said, "Is it with a kiss that you are betraying the Son of Man?" And at that moment, total chaos broke out. Our friends started to fight and push. We were reaching for rocks and weapons, and Peter drew out his sword and was flailing about, and in the confusion of a slave's ear got cut off. But Jesus stepped right forward and told them to stop, and they did. The first thing he did was he healed the slave's ear. I was so proud of him and yet so terrified. But he stood bravely in front of them all and asked them why they came after him as though he was a dangerous criminal. He reminded them that he had been with them every day and they hadn't arrested him. And then he said something that stopped my tears, nearly stopped my heart. But this is your hour. The hour of the power of darkness. When they took him to the high priest, I stayed as close as I could. I tried to catch his eye, to send him my love and my courage. But Peter and his friends, they kept their distance. I heard Peter say to different people that he wasn't with Jesus, he didn't even know who he was, and that made me feel quite bitter. The third time he said it, Jesus turned and caught Peter's eye. Something passed between them at that moment that made Peter turn and run away in tears. Peter told me later that Jesus had predicted that he would betray him. He told me I would deny I ever knew him, not once but 3 times, and I simply would not believe that I could ever do that to him, he said. But the teacher knew my heart, just as he always did. My next memory is them making fun of Jesus, beating him. It's a mother's nightmare to see her son being treated this way. I felt such rage, such helpless fury as I watched them. They blindfolded him, they called him names, they even spit on him. I couldn't bear to stand there and watch, but I couldn't bear to not be there either. So I stayed, weeping silently with the other women who grieved with me. I did not sleep that night, and in the morning they took him to the chief priest, and then the questions started. So many questions. But Jesus answered them all, turning their own words back on them, refusing to be trapped, yet never, ever denying his truth. But even as I was fiercely proud of him, I wanted to hush him, just get him away from there. When the chief priest asked, "Are you the Son of God?" my son said to him, "You say that I am." And at that moment I knew things had turned a corner. I knew it then, even before the chief priests confirmed it, even before they decided to take him to Pilate. And Pilate had more questions. He asked my son if he was king of the Jews, and he answered, "Well, you say so." Eventually, Pilate said something that gave me a moment of hope. "I find no basis for an accusation against this man." I breathed a sigh of relief. I looked around at my neighbours, at my friends, expecting that they too would see that finally Jesus was innocent and this ridiculous charade could be done with. But they all avoided my eyes. They seemed vicious, angry, self-righteous. They kept insisting that Pilate should do something. Pilate should take action against Jesus, and I felt confused and desperate. How had this happened? These were people that I knew, that I thought knew me, that I thought they knew us. But no, not now. Now they were just a mindless crowd, angry, shouting, baying for blood. And after several frightening minutes, Pilate again stated that he could find nothing that Jesus had done wrong, nothing that deserved death, so he would have my son flogged and released. I breathed again for a moment. Of course, no mother wants to see her son hurt anymore, to see him in pain. But if a flogging would end this, I knew he could enjoy it. We could endure it. Then Mary and I, we could take him home. We could tend to his wounds. We could have a meal, and it would all be okay. But then I heard again the raging noise of the crowd. It finally broke through my thoughts again. Pilate's words had just enraged them even more, and someone shouted out for a prisoner to be released, but no, not my son, and the crowd roared its approval. And when Pilate asked them what should be done with Jesus, the next words I heard were beyond the worst nightmare of a mother. These crowds, these animals, screaming, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" I tried to reason with those standing next to me, but I don't even think they even heard me. In the end, they got what they wanted. Pilate released the murderer, and my son, was sentenced to the ugliest, lowliest, cruelest death. Death by crucifixion. remember the crowd that followed him up the hill. A lot of them were just onlookers, gawkers. There were some there who really cared, like my friend Simon, who helped him carry that heavy, hideous cross. And our women friends, who were wailing and beating their breasts in love and in mourning, and they never let up the whole way there. That walk, every step, seemed to go on forever, and yet we were there too soon. In a heartbeat, we were there at the place called the Skull, where it was to end. I watched it all, his pain, his agony, the brutality of that death. I held his eyes in mine and I never looked away. Even then, his heart was thinking of forgiveness. Forgiveness towards the soldiers that were casting lots to divide up his clothing. Forgiveness of the ones who scoffed, of the ones who taunted, of the ones who mocked him. Even the criminals hanging alongside him couldn't let him be. One of them kept calling out, "Whoa, are you not the Messiah? Come on, save yourself, save us!" Finally, the other one shouted for him to shut up. They were getting what they deserved. Jesus, he had done nothing wrong. And then the criminal said something I remember even now. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." My feelings were a torrent of love and grief for my son, of anger, of bewilderment. How had it come to this? My child, my loved one, born of the Spirit, is dying on a hot, dusty hill between two criminals. Despair flooded through me then. It all seemed so pointless. I wanted to lash out with the hate and the pain that was in my heart. And then I heard him praying, still praying, to his Abba, Father. Praying for the people who were killing him. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." My child is not just my beloved son, but God's too. In this awful death, he was still giving life. Noon finally came on that endless, endless day, and I continued to watch, to keep vigil at the foot of that torturous cross. At noon it was very strange. It got suddenly dark, right in the middle of the day, as though the sun's light was dying at the same time as he was. Then, after hearing nothing for a long while, I heard his voice ringing loud and clear one last time. "Father God, into your hands I commend my spirit." I looked up desperate to see his eyes one last time, fighting off my despair, to give him my one last ounce of love for him as he breathed his last. I don't remember a lot that happened after that. I know there was a centurion there who saw it all, and he praised God and said, "Certainly this man was innocent." I remember Joseph went to Pilate and was given permission to collect the body. I was so relieved that at least we could take him down before the carrion came. So Joseph and the women and I, we gently removed this empty, broken body of the man who I bore and raised. We removed from the nails and the wood of that horrible cross, and we rubbed his skin with ointments, and we smoothed his hair and wrapped him in the cloths with the burial spices and placed him gently in a new tomb and left him there where no one had been buried before. It's funny how little details remain after all this time. I remember, right as we finished, the Sabbath was just beginning. So all the Sabbath day we rested, but there was no rest, never any rest for me, for my broken heart, for my grief. Jesus, my son, was dead.